Hello everyone, welcome to the official launch of the International Student Network on Climate, UniC. We're directly from Quebec City, since we know that our members come from 63 different countries. We're really happy to have you with us. And by the way, there will be a survey sent to you in a few minutes. My name is Véronique Fournier. I will be the moderator for today. I'm a PhD student at Laval Université, and I'm also a member of the organizing committee of UniC. This will be a bilingual event, translated simultaneously. You can choose your language on the taskbar on the Zoom, or just listen to the original bilingual version. Our guests today will have the hard task of answering the following question: can students save the climate?
So just before introducing our guests, I would like to say a few words on today's program. So first, we would invite everybody to turn on their webcams. That would increase the dynamism of the event, and we'd be very glad to see our audience. Second, please note there will be a Q&A session at the end of this activity. So you're invited to share your questions on today's subject, can students save the climate? Our moderator will select your questions from the chat, so you can share them as soon as they come up, and she will select and forward the questions at the end of the roundtables.
Without further delay, I will introduce our guests today. We are very fortunate. We have with us Sophie d'Amour, Rector of Laval Université, and she will launch the discussion with our participants. Hello, Mrs. d'Amour. Hello everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here to see you all, and very happy. Thank you. Mrs. d'Amour is very proud of the international leadership of Laval Université in sustainable development, and especially for the UniC Network.
On our panel today, first we would like to welcome Dr. Amelia Clarke. Dr. Clarke, thank you for joining us. Dr. Clarke, do you hear us? Yes?
I do. It's my pleasure to be here.
Dr. Clarke is Associate Dean of Research for the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo. She has a long history of working for climate and sustainability action on Canadian campuses, and she's also a strong believer in youth-led change. Next member on our panel today is Dr. Melissa Goodall. Dr. Goodall, we're glad to have you here.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me. Merci.
Dr. Goodall is Deputy Director of Sustainability at Yale University. She is developing and implementing action plans at Yale's professional school, and she also works on a set of initiatives to highlight the role universities can play in advancing the Sustainable Development Goals.
Finally, with me here, Mr. Cedrik Verreault. Hello, Cedrik. Hello, Véronique. So he is a student in political sciences at Laval Université, very much committed in his community. And he's part of the Planète Civique in Université, which is inspired from Fridays for Future. And he was part of the organization of one of the largest university event in Quebec. So much for the presentation introductions. Go to unic.laval.ca to have all the bios. I will give the floor to the rector, Mrs. d'Amour. Thank you very much, Véronique. I'm very happy to say hello to all you students, collaborators, partners, university colleagues. The International Student Network for Climate is launched. At first, UniC was supposed to be launched after the first University Student Summit planned for last July in Quebec City, and I don't need to explain to you that the current pandemic shuffled our plans. 2020 is a special year. However, it offers a period of reflection and questioning. a year that leads us to reflect on the role we want to play, the ideas we want to implement in order to innovate, a path that belongs to all of us, no matter what continent we're on. So I'm very proud that you, members of the international student community, partners, guests, have accepted the invitation to join this unique UniC network. It will bring together strengths, expertise, ideas to discuss new solutions in the field of climate action, solutions that could change the course of history. So this is a role that had played for more than 30 years one eminent researcher in the field of climate change, Louis Fortier. Unfortunately, we're really sad to say that Mr. Fortier left. He was deceased last Sunday. He was a visionary, a leader that stood out over the years, implementing broad initiatives and the Pan-Canadian Arctic Network, the research icebreaker NGCC Amundsen, and the Nordique Institute of Quebec. Traveling over the Arctic seas over his careers, he was the first one, a pioneer in the social and demographics and ecologic changes, climate changes, and also the climate change. I invite you to continue the path of Professor Fortier with the same passion, determination, developing different positions for different situations. Professor Fortier always focused on interdisciplinarity, on appreciating the complexity of all the challenges and recognized the need of a social acceptability and efforts inherent to transition and problem solving. He was always an advocate for the value of science and facts. We can all play a role, partners, because the network can take shape today thanks to the Government of Quebec, the Government of Canada, Quebec City, and as well as the McCall-McBain Foundation, the Office Franco-Québécois for the Youth, and Logique, the Quebec International Youth Offices. We would like also to recognize the precious collaboration of Université of Lausanne and the Adu Diop University in Bombay. Thank you for your support and for the great partnerships, your contribution to this collective challenge, which is the climate change. Now, students, through your classes, your research projects, and your initiatives, you were involved in favor of climate so that things change, so that you can be actors of change. It is in response to this aspiration that Université Laval launched the UniC International Student Network for Climate. This is an opportunity to bring together university students from all 5 continents around collective and interdisciplinary projects. So congratulations first, students and students, to be involved the way you're doing it and to be here today. To get together into that effort. I see that it is very promising. So let us start right now the reflection around the theme, students, can they save the climate? Together with Amelia, Clarke from University of Waterloo, Melissa Goodall from Yale University, Cedrik Verreault from a student at Laval Université, member of UniC Network, and Véronique Fournier, our MC today, and all of you. Now let's talk together. I will start with a first question, general one, but Just to get started, because the theme, you remember why climate change and student action, is it that important to talk about the theme? I will ask you the following questions. What can students bring in the struggle against climate change? Can students save the climate? I think the best person to launch the discussion is, of course, Cedrik Verreault. So I will give him the floor. Cedrik, can you share your views? Thank you very much, Mrs. Rector. We understood that I'm not an academic or a researcher like the panelists I greet here. I'm a student on a daily basis. I'd like to be engaged in causes like climate and environment. I will answer the questions and putting it in context in terms of advocacy and mobilization. Saint-Exupéry said something like, we don't inherit from the earth, we just borrow the earth. As far as I'm concerned, borrowing is a responsibility, and the meaning of responsibility is something that was taught to us by those preceding us. Unfortunately, in terms of climate and environment, we can say that a repeated alert by activists and scientists woke up, if I can say, people who will live with the consequence of the ignorance, lack of action of some leaders of political, economic organizations and academics also. These are things that students of today will pay for tomorrow. As Véronique said, this is why I was involved in Planète Civique Université. I was involved in other actions, but I want to bear the action of this collective action by students. Ignorance or lack of action by some leaders, we can say, are they aware or not? Well, we can debate on this. But they know about the facts, especially the academic environment has no excuse. We do research, we have classes, we attend conferences like this one. Education is our strength. In one of my classes, I read an article on the impact of media on behavior, and just a little excerpt here. It said that people facing problems in their daily life will consider these problems as important in public debate more than those who are not impacted. So I read this, and my parallel here for me, if students at the end of the day, with our education and with the facts and data we have, if we are we considering ourselves like future victims of climate change? It explains why students are so committed and engaged in fighting against climate. And this explains why it's so important for us. It's about our future. So finally, everything we do is just take our responsibility. This is what we have to do. Each generation is more educated than the previous one, and we have to continue on this path. Thank you. Thank you, Cedrik, for the very wise words and this reflection. Amelia.
What would you answer to this question? Est-ce que vous parlez français ou anglais?
Anglais.
Parfait.
So, hello, bonjour. Before I start, I just want to do a quick land acknowledgement. I'm coming from Waterloo, Canada, and so we're on the territory of the Attawattaran, Anishinaabeg, and Haudenosaunee Indigenous peoples. Now, in terms of the question, what can students bring to the fight against climate change? So much, but I think it can be summed up in the long-term perspective that young people bring, innovation that comes with being young, and a persistent demand for action. And I thought I'd just share an example from my history of something we achieved that you can maybe look at as a story of what can you learn from that in terms of what you can do today. But when I was 23, I started a national youth environmental coalition called the Sierra Youth Coalition, or Coalition Jeunesse Sierra en français. And what we did is we launched a sustainable campus program. So it was made up of students and student groups on different campuses across Canada. And we started with the various student groups doing sustainability assessments of their campus to determine what is the benchmark of where we're starting. Then from there, we pushed for the various administrations to put in a sustainability policy, to start reporting on sustainability, to create multi-stakeholder committees to look at the implementation of that policy, and to put in staff positions. Through that effort, we influenced change on over 80 university and college campuses in Canada. And the positions that are there today, those sustainability policies, the sustainability directors and coordinators that are in various positions, that all came from student pressure years ago, but you can take them for granted today, but it all came from student action at the time. So what does that mean for your network? Well, I think there's a huge potential here to be the next generation of institutionalizing climate action on our campuses. So pushing for commitments to carbon neutrality, and then further than that, making sure that your campus has a plan on how it's going to meet that commitment, and then trying to speed it up. So do students make a difference? Absolutely. In fact, I think it will take student action to keep climate a priority for what we're focusing on campuses. And you're a really important piece of a much larger unit, much larger movement, if I can. You can use your spheres of influence to impact individuals, to impact other students, to impact your campus, to impact your cities, and government policy. And frankly, I believe that we're not going to see the transformation we need to address the climate emergency without student action. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia, for this great example and demonstration of how the action, the student involvement and commitment, and has been successful and impactful already, and what it can really do. To you now, Melissa, what's your point of view on this?
So first, thank you so much again for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I'm so excited to see how many people are checking in from around the world. This is amazing. So thank you to everyone who's here. As Cedrik put it very well, today's generation has a real mess to clean up. The previous generations have not done a great job. We're doing our level best, some of us, but there's a lot to be done, and there's a huge burden in your future. And for that, on behalf of our generations, I apologize. In terms of what students can do today, I think I actually checked in with my daughter, who is turning 18 next month, about some of this, because obviously I have an opinion, but her opinion is extremely important in this context. And so we brainstormed this. Part of it is that today's students don't have the bad habits some of us have. The bad habits have to do with having single occupancy vehicles, having many, many square feet of office space, etc. There's an opportunity to really have a sea change in how things are done. The other thing that strikes me is that the energy and enthusiasm that today's students have in this very globalized world benefits from instant communication. And this instant communication that's so intuitive to current students is something that is extraordinary and can be leveraged in so many positive ways. I think this instinct for networking and for visual memes and making things exciting and making it cool. Sustainability is now cool. My daughter and all of her friends thrift shop and they don't drive, and it's just cool. And making it cool is going to be the best part, because then the older generations are going to see what's cool, and then we're going to try to be cool too. So I think there's an element there too. The other thing that I would say is that there is such a wonderful instinct in today's college kids of holistic thinking and recognizing that these barriers that we have in academia, where sociology is here and science is here, those don't exist in actual life. Those are really important for becoming experts. Those are really important for narrowing down topics and for doing deep dives. But there's a real need to acknowledge that solutions must be comprehensive. And so I think Amelia's experience as a college student made me think of my experience as a college student. I was an acting major for my undergraduate. And one wouldn't think that one goes from being an acting major to a climate advocate, but here I am many, many years later, being able to really plug into the social side of what absolutely needs to happen. So I think this instinct for holistic thinking, and then also the inclusivity and acceptance that goes along with these other thought processes. You know, this is the generation that is going to overcome racism to the extent we can. This is the generation that doesn't practice tolerance, they practice inclusivity. So for our generation, it was, let's tolerate other people. And now we're turning the page and getting beyond that to being fully embracing what makes society so wonderful, which is different perspectives, different backgrounds, and different lifestyles. So I would say those are my major points. Cool inclusivity is my major thought to that question.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much. I think that you're setting the stage for what is coming next, and I appreciate the reflection of all of you, and I think that it would be timely to see how this set of observation, comment, and forward perspective that you all brought in would be the super sideway. Et je vais revenir en français parce que je suis partie en anglais.
I'll switch back to French. This is a perfect transition for Véronique to take the microphone and introduce the network. So up to you, Véronique. Thank you so much, Mrs. Rector. Thank you to the panelists for this very promising opening of the roundtable. According to the survey, we're happy to see that our attendees and networks are from all over the world.
Please don't be shy. Share your questions through the chat. You can address them to one or two of our panelists who just discussed, to be sure to discuss these subjects further in the Q&A session.
We will continue with the UniC Network thanks to a video presented by the scientific program Jean-Frédéric Morin and Anne Bernard.
Hello everyone, my name is Anne Bernard and I'm a student at Laval University in forest science.
And I'm Jean-Frédéric Morin. I teach political science also at Laval. And with Anne, we are the co-chair of the scientific committee. We told you last year, Anne and I, about the summit that was going to take place. But actually, we're working on much more than a summit. We're trying to create a network of students involved on climate. There's already a number of networks out there on climate. There are networks for cities, networks for businesses, for NGOs, for scientists, but there's little platform to empower students, to connect students from different countries so that the network is greater than the sum of the individual parts, and basically for the benefits of everyone.
So mainly, UniC Network wants to bring you together. We want to facilitate the collaboration. We want to put in front your action in climate. So for us, it's really important to make sure we facilitate connection between you. Also, we know that as students, we have different interests.
We have facilitated the deployment of 5 themes: a student as a learner, as a researcher, as a citizen, involved in the campus, and the entrepreneur student. Members of the network come from different disciplines. Some of you are in medical science, sociology, law. Not only you come from different disciplines, but from different countries and backgrounds. We have representatives from all continents that are already part of UniC. That's thanks to the peer review. Peer review is already well established in the academic world. We thought that it would be especially appropriate for UniC, since after all, this is your network, so it is quite normal that you will be the one to choose who is part of that network.
We wanted to make sure that UniC Network is is really interactive. So we develop different kinds of activities. On one side, we have the collaborative projects that will take place all year round.
It will be possible for you to be involved in all these different activities,
which are podcasts. We will have a journal. We will have videos, forums. So make sure you know what will be your interest to maybe choose the committee that will fit you. Also, we will have punctual activities as the summit.
We will also have simulations, summer school, and hackathon.
So make sure you follow us on social media to know exactly what's going on and what will take place in the next months.
Also, this fall, there's going to be a second wave of recruitment. So if you know students who are already active on climate, who are doing great work through their research or their activism on climate, please let them know that they can submit their application this fall.
We wish you all a great launch. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Jean-Frédéric. That will be very committing. So we refer you to the website unic.ulaval.ca if you want more information. Let's continue now with the second round of this discussion. Mrs. Rector, it's up to you now. Oh, thank you very much. So we started to heating up our discussion with the history, personal story concerning climate change, and I would say that there's something that I remember from what you said. To commit, you need to have that ideal, that passion. You need to be see yourself in the future. There's an inner strength with this will of seeing a better world, seeing a better situation, and you have expressed it in different ways. But now, how can we show our action now? How can students participate? And what makes it difficult for them to get in action, to be engaged, and to have this impact? Cedrik, can you answer with a few words? Yes, Mrs. Rector. Okay. I think that the first answer, which is quite obvious for us, we studied on university campuses. Now we have seen in many of our colleges or schools or high schools, we have seen student strikes for climate. The concept of strikes was never used for, how can I say, don't want to say abstract issues, but, you know, something societal, yes, societal issues. So student strikes is a unique concept. It was not seen 2 years ago. Now we see it often. My co-panelists were talking about putting some pressure, lobbying. This is exactly the goal of this demonstration of strength with the number. This is not ending at the limit of our campus. We're talking about walks, demonstrations, sittings. So on the campus, but going into the community, wanting to include citizens, where I can talk about personal experience. March 15, 2019, young people walking with us, high school students. Normally they don't use strikes. They joined us, and also families, parents going with our children, and seniors aware of intergenerational justice. So yes, demonstrations with many people, and the demonstration aspect is not necessary. I would say, well, the fact of being seen and heard with a lot of people, so numerous of us, if this does lead to concrete action by leaders, well, each community has its own context. Here in Quebec City, I know that mobilization has not ended. We are still awaiting actions in some specific areas. And we were talking about issues. This is the second part of the answer. Yes, there's the pandemic. One panelist said that we were supposed to maintain this climate issue on the agenda. There's so many other issues that come up. So this demonstration take another form. We invest in student associations. They take positions that are daring. And when doing this, these student associations, yours, mine, we will ensure the cooperation of their members and the recognition of a few members. So invest in student associations, and we talk about racism. So large claims for social justice and also environmental assessment. Thank you, Cedrik.
Melissa?
Yes. Cedrik, that was fascinating, and thank you very much. I will say, in terms of the second prompt, it was very exciting to me. The first thing is in the immediate. Climate action starts now. It starts in your day-to-day choices. It starts in eating plants. It starts in planting trees. It starts in buying used. It starts in practicing rather than preaching. Really walking the talk and knowing your stuff and advancing the truth. And that's what I really appreciate about Cedrik's comments. I do hear a lot, to be honest, of talk that's not necessarily grounded in truth. It's more grounded in enthusiasm from some student groups. And I really appreciate that Cedrik is taking the time to really advance the truth and also to acknowledge the connections between climate activism and racism in particular. I think in planning for the future, that's part of what the students now have an opportunity to do, which is choosing multidisciplinary studies. I saw a question come up about how one can be holistic. I would challenge that person. I think it's important to ask how one can not be holistic in your thought processes. So really thinking about choosing multidisciplinary pathways. If you're really interested in the biology of climate change, think about how that biology is going to translate into policy or translate into humanities. Work with the various sort of mindsets and inform your own passions with the passions of others. I would say choose courses and opportunities that give you hands-on opportunities. Vote. That's so important. Of course, here in the United States, I think everybody knows that's extremely important right now, but vote. And vote, but also be a realistic. We had a thing happen here a few years ago where those who supported the most progressive candidate, who had done the most for climate action, he didn't have a chance of winning and they didn't vote because he wasn't going to be the one. Please be realistic in terms of your hopes and desires and what is actually feasible. And then learning how to pick tactics to help build your critical capacity. The climate strikes are effective in some circumstances. What we've seen on some campuses, at least here in the United States, is sometimes they do more harm than good. Because the students are not being respectful and are being disruptive in a way that alienates other students as well as alienates members of the community. So if there are ways to be loud and visible without being negative, I would encourage that very much. In terms of challenges, I would say, number one, and I appreciate deeply that Cedrik has already referenced this, but consider how equitable your activities are. Are you marching through the streets and leaving a bunch of garbage on the sidewalk that then causes frustration for those who have to clean up after you? Are you mindful of the people whose lives you may be impacting? It's funny because we're having these big conversations about what a just transition means in terms of decarbonization. And obviously I'm committing my entire career to decarbonization, but I've been having conversations with research centers in Africa that are doing really interesting work looking at what decarbonization means to countries that rely on the income from fossil fuels and how we have to take that holistic approach and look at the whole system. So what is it that we're actually asking for? And is it just to all people that we're considering? I would say practice respect in every single one of these movements. And I think Greta Thunberg has done an extraordinary thing in raising awareness about the capacity of a young person to change minds and to call attention to this imperative. I think that there is a need to do so in a way that is respectful and inclusive intergenerationally as well. I'm not saying that that the current generation of students should slow down and wait to go at the older generation's pace. I'm saying be respectful and be mindful in that regard. And then I think the final thing that I would say on this point is choose to be optimistic. This is really hard because we are all going through grief and stress about the horrible things that we see happening currently related to climate change in the world, and the forecasted future if we don't get a lot more proactive very quickly. If we choose to be optimistic, we can channel that energy in positive ways and make it so that we are focusing on the future we choose, to borrow the phrase from Christiana Figueres, and the future we want, the future we need, rather than the future that we're terrified of. And building momentum around a positive vision is going to be much more effective.
Melissa, can I ask you a sub-question on this? You open such a number of interesting perspectives and defining how difficult it is to accept some kind of compromise in the process, in a way that this holistic challenge calls on us on saying, okay, we have this ideal, we have this ideal, we're going there, but how do we deal with a posture that is between a transitional approach and a more drastic and rapid approach? And hearing you, I feel that there is some real challenge in defining that posture.
I think that's a wonderful question, and I think it's a very important question, particularly for student activists. I hear a lot about what the student activists are against, and I would love to hear more from the student activists. And please take this any way you want, the right way, the wrong way, but what are you for rather than what are you against? And so this rapid transition, and I see in the chat that the pandemic has come up. The pandemic has showed us that we do not need to fly as much as we fly. We do not need to drive as much as we drive. We do not need the number of square feet on the average college campus that we have. And so this dramatic change, and this is my mantra for the pandemic, we must go back to a new normal. There is absolutely no way I want to go back to how we were doing it before. But if I go around saying, I'm so excited, nobody can fly, nobody can print paper, nobody gets an office, negative, 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 it's not going to build the momentum we need. But if I say instead, hey, tomorrow's university is going to be this wonderful place where we have community and we have respect and we don't use as much stuff. And it's really focusing on that positive vision, I think, will be is a really effective way. And again, I recommend Christiana Figueres' recent book because it's entirely about creating an optimistic vision for the future. What does it look like if we don't all have enormous homes and single occupancy vehicles, and every single household has the exact same set of tools, and every single household has the exact same, there's a vision that's so positive and community oriented that we can really, if we can all identify what that is and spend the next 10 years working on that together, I think we'll make real progress.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you very much. Amelie, what's your take on this?
Wanting to jump in on the last question, but first I'll ask the one I was asked first. So I've done a lot of research on the question of student and youth-led social change, and there's no doubt that young people can have an impact. As part of my bio for this session, I shared one of our journal articles where we listed different student-led climate initiatives that are happening on campuses. So if you want to go into my bio, you can find that and see some of the initiatives that you could choose from. But right now, I actually wanted to take a higher level and look at what are the strategies that are open to young people. And our research has really brought this down to there are 4 strategies you could choose from. You can use them together or alone, and they'll all lead to different levels of impact. So the most common strategy for young people is awareness raising. That's number 1. So this would be events on campus to raise the importance of climate action. Perhaps you're doing workshops on the importance and how to do a plant-based diet, for example. This raises awareness. The second strategy is influence. So influence strategies would include things like the demonstrations that Cedrik was talking about, where you're trying to influence policy, government policy. It might include sitting on a university committee as the student reps, and you're influencing the decisions being made at the university level. The third strategy open to you is partnerships. There are many examples with this. It could be that you're partnering with another organization, for example, career services, to offer a fair that lines up, well, how can I build climate action into an engineering career or into a law career or into other careers? And we found, at least in the Canadian context, joining the youth wing of a political party is actually one of your most potential areas of having high impact, because that policy that you influence through the youth wing gets made into the party platform. And then your fourth strategy option is direct impact. In other words, directly mitigating climate emissions. So an example of this would be, for example, installing renewable energy generation on your student union building, for example, which you may control on your campus. So these four strategies, each of them can lead to an impact, and I'll just repeat them again: awareness raising, influence, partnerships, or direct impact. But many students tend to go for the awareness raising, and awareness raising alone will not lead you to systemic change. So you have to go to the higher levels in order to bring systemic change about. Now, I noticed in the chat there's a lot of questions about developing country context, and I would say you may have less opportunity to use the influence strategy in that context, and maybe more need for an awareness raising strategy initially, but you may have more opportunity on the partnership and direct. So I'll leave it at that, but think strategically and then think about what your initiatives will be.
And I guess all of you, what you're saying is that, and you tell me if I summarize this correctly, but there is a scale up of opportunity to go from this awareness and making sure that, and I'll shift to French,
to ensure that our society is aware or develops its awareness concerning the impact of climate change. And this awareness, this holistic awareness, as Melissa said, is one thing, but beyond it's about the contribution of the youth, the young students, to articulating solutions. So that's key, I think. There is like a gap, or we're asking, how can I say, we are creating this pressure, and then there's a gap in contributing to the solution, because it's transferred to leaders, political parties, organizations. So how to build this partnership you're talking about, Amelia? I think there's a lot of ideas. We see that on our campuses expressed in different ways, and it's very interesting. I would feel like asking another question, maybe the last one for this first round of discussion. What can universities do to allow students to express themselves, to commit, to be in the action mode, and also to allow this respectful discussion and debate Melissa was referring to, and you too, Amelia and Cedrik. So this capacity to discuss, to mediate, and also to go forward together in a respectful way. Melissa, I would like to start first with this question. Have you initiated, what would be your advice to the network? What should we do what should universities do to allow climate involvement of students in climate change?
So it's a great question, and it's one that I will answer a little bit carefully because, of course, my bosses might be listening. But my first thing is, and this one's easy. First thing, climate activism is always best when it's informed by deep knowledge. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I find curious about the current method of university education in most places is that there are so many silos. One has to be a biologist or a business person, and the integration thereof is so important. So encouraging, allowing for transdisciplinary studies, encouraging, setting it up so that students can pursue with a firm foundation in robust academic inquiry, of course, but pursue degrees that suit their personalities, that suit their passion points, etc. I think this is so necessary now because there are so many statistics on how tomorrow's professions don't even exist yet. So tomorrow's professions in terms of climate action are so important. When I first went into climate action, my father told me that there would be no jobs. Unfortunately for me, I think I have job security for life. But the other thing is offering students hands-on experience. That which is learned in the classroom is so important, but it sets so much more in such an important way when students are allowed to act on this and physically touch things and make things happen. So giving students the opportunity to experience things firsthand. I do think, as I said earlier, we have to learn from the pandemic. We should be, every single university on the planet should be really reconsidering things like being able to, through this platform, bring in speakers from around the world is so extraordinary. What a gift of knowledge we can offer one another by being able to do things virtually. I think too, we should really consider, and this is the one that might get me into a little bit of trouble, but we here in the United States tend to define a university's excellence based on who the university excludes. We are all keenly aware of what our acceptance rates are, and I think there is a modicum of excellence to that because we are highly sought after. On the same token, are we setting the right metrics when we do this? Can we start to think about how we're empowering the next generation of innovators, how we are really empowering the people who are going to help us address the most pressing challenges in the world? I think that's a really, really, really important element of this. And I say this as a person whose daughter is looking at colleges and universities. I promise we're looking for the innovative programs rather than the most excellent programs by those metrics. We want to be able to define a career path. I think that universities absolutely must actively listen to the fear, anger, and frustration of the climate activists. I think there is a tendency on some campuses to say, oh, we understand that you're upset about climate. Here, we have these courses that you can take. And I feel like there's a much more proactive take that universities can have. And I'm proud that we are really working hard on that here at Yale University. I put into the chat the Global University Climate Forum. This is a part of what we're doing to play an active role in empowering the next step for those students. And then I would say, last but not least, a little bit of financial resources goes a long way when it comes to climate action. There is, of course, the necessary element of investing in a carbon neutral campus, which Yale is working on very actively, and many campuses around the world have already committed to neutrality. And I'm proud to say that Yale has committed to neutrality and is working very hard on achieving it, but also funding innovation, to the extent we can offer students funding to test their crazy ideas, because only crazy ideas are really going to fix the climate crisis. So that's my last thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you very much. I think that you gave us great ideas, and you're challenging administration, but you're challenging also professors, students, all of the university community to move on in this rethinking process of how we can better prepare ourselves for the upcoming challenges of our society with what we know today. And I thank you for that. I think it's a very strong message. Amelia, what would be your recommendation?
So first I would say the university should be listening to students and then involving them in all of the things throughout. Universities are really involved in 4 different aspects where it relates to climate. One is the operations of the university. Another is the teaching. So what is it we're teaching? What are our degree programs? What are students exposed to? Third is research. And what are we doing through our research? And then finally is our engagement with community. And so each one of those could have an element of a climate lens as well as student involvement. So for example, at the University of Waterloo, we have a master's in climate change, but we've also embedded climate into a lot of other programs. We also have a research hub and institute with over 100 professors who all do climate related research, and then they can work. And there's way more than that in terms of graduate students also involved in that. In terms of the operations, I just want to echo Melissa in terms of carbon neutrality and the commitments. My university's also made this commitment. We now have a carbon neutral shift plan. So we've really mapped out exactly where we're going to make these reductions by when. Starting really with the scope 1 and 2 emissions, but we have also built in scope 3. And now we're trying to figure out, how do you measure business travel? Because it's actually one of our largest emissions. Now, advice to the students who are listening today. My main piece of advice would be to start with yourself and your own ecological footprint. So really think about your food choices, your consumption choices, your mobility choices, and start by walking the talk yourself. And through that, you're going to learn a lot. Next, I would say, look at your sphere of influence. So who else might you be able to influence, whether it's your family or your university or your community? And grow that sphere over time. Demand ambitious change now. It's really the youth and the students are the only ones who can really ask for the type of change we need to address the climate emergency. And then the rest of us will then try and find that compromise. But if you're not asking for the most ambitious change possible, then the middle ground's going to be in the wrong place. So really, push hard for ambition, knowing that probably it'll be slower than you wish. But if you don't ask for that, we're not going to move at all. And then my last piece of advice is keep sustainable development in mind. I wore my SDG pin today, but we need to address, as others have brought up, this approach. We need to address social inequity and systemic racism through climate action. So I'll just
Thank you very much. I will just invite you to conclude as time is flying by. I just want to make sure you have time to answer the public's questions as well. So if you can conclude briefly.
I'm done. I was just going to say thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And we give the opportunity, Véronique, to Cedrik.
Can we ask Cedrik to answer the answer also before we go to the Q&A? Yes, absolutely. Cedrik, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but yes, I would like to thank Dr. Clarke and Drs. Clarke and Goodall. The answers were great. I think that basically, despite my positions here, these approaches are not mutually exclusive. We can totally include them. So thank you so much. I learned a lot. I was going to ask how university can support student action, lead by example of our power. In the case of a university, what are the powers? Industrial partnerships, R&D, and I'll use the optimistic angle, as Dr. Goodall said. Choose sustainable projects, choose respectful projects with our visions, and choose projects that are respectful of local social acceptability criteria and also industrial projects. So to use well credibility universities have publicly to put forth all issues, environmental and climate issues. We are in a unique context where scientific facts are part of the news. We have to use that and advance our climate issues in conversations. So using a public university can lose sight of the public issues and directly contradict actions they are doing in the campus and to contradict members of our faculties who are great spokespersons for science and the field of climate and environment. We cannot ask those institutions, and they need to keep these scientists. So what are we for? We are for control actions and mechanisms. We can consult students. We can talk about participative governance, yes, involve students at all levels in decisions of universities having an economic and environmental impact. So participative governance. Thank you, Cedrik. And I think this opens up the door to many questions. Véronique, how do you want to go about with the Q&A period? Questions will be sent to you, and I will ask them to all four of you. Mrs. Rector, if you wish to contribute. I would like to invite you to answer 2 minutes in 2 minutes, just to have a few answers. Time flies. If some of you have commitments, we understand. We just want to have the chance to ask the answer and share what the public right. The first question is from
Destinée. The first question is for Dr. Clarke, and we would ask Dr. Goodall to complete the first answer. The question is the following. Could you discuss more about the ways students could team up with their university or their faculty to help move climate action projects forward inside or outside the walls of the university? Dr. Clarke, I would invite you to begin.
Oh, there's so many ways, but you're asking about teaming up with the university. It depends where your starting point is. So my first suggestion would be to find out what your university has done already, if anything. Have they done a greenhouse gas inventory? Do they have commitments? Do they have plans? Because if you know where your starting place is, then you can decide how then to push it further. But I would also say use your class assignments. If you have the opportunity to do a thesis or have choice in your class assignments, there may be ways that you can make it useful for your campus and make it useful to the community. So those are just 2 suggestions off the top of my head. I know you want me to keep it short.
Thank you. Dr. Goodall, would you have anything to add?
I agree with both of those points. I think those are both excellent. Using your class assignments is how we got our first greenhouse gas inventory done. So if you haven't had a greenhouse gas inventory, explore that as an option with your campus. I would also say the opportunity to be positive and proactive and collaborative rather than combative is always preferable. We have a group here on campus that approached us and wanted to put photovoltaics on every single one of our 400 plus buildings. And we thought that was a really neat idea, but certainly not feasible because some of our buildings are just not appropriate and some of them are visually iconic. And what we were able to do was team up with them to really make it into a learning experience because they were willing to be adaptive in their approach. So having a good positive idea and adaptive mentality is probably going to be the most effective way.
Thank you very much. We are all ready for the second question coming from Keya Ein. I hope I said your name right. The question is the following. When discussing the concept of holistic thinking, you mentioned that solutions will only be found when thinking holistically and including everyone. However, how do you translate solution ideas into practice, especially on a local or a national level? I think there's nobody, no panelists destined for this question, so I invite one of you 4 to simply jump in to answer.
If I may contribute, I don't have all answers, but certainly this is a very tough issue. It is difficult in universities, you know, also because the perspective of fighting against climate change varies so much according to different disciplines and faculties. And I see it at the university in Laval here. We have many chairs, researchers, research teams, and some of them are totally in a perspective of carbon-free, and other are in line with a solution of transforming the economy. But everybody's has to play its role. It's kind of a challenge where in universities we have to leave everyone the opportunity of bringing its knowledge, its expertise in various fields. But it's so difficult to implement. I don't know. I just bring this up for our experts here. I don't know if you have any recommendations. I think that there is a sort of an energy which is there. We feel it. At Laval, we have more than 60% of research chairs addressing sustainable development objectives in their activities. Now, for some, it's stretching the elastic, if I can say, and for others, it's their life contribution. You know, so it's a sort of a challenge to reconcile the capacity, perspective, and also environment to see that everybody all together. And I think that Melissa's recommendation is to have training and research processes that are more interdisciplinary. That will help. Everyone can bring its contribution at their own expertise in the field of own expertise in projects of different nature. So I throw the ball back to you with a little twist, talking about challenges as a professor and an administrator.
Dr. Clarke, Dr. Goodall, Cedrik, would you have anything you wish to add to this discussion?
I would like to hear the two professors here.
I can speak to this if you want. So I would just say this is why I prefer a sustainable development lens than a pure climate lens, because embedded in is a holistic thinking where you're thinking about the social elements and the economic at the same time as environmental. So at the community level, I've studied a lot of sustainable community plans, and so it touches a whole bunch of different topics, the same as the SDGs, but scaled down to the local level. And part of the way to engage that, the different perspectives, is through multi-stakeholder engagement, both in the planning process, but also in the implementation process. So the same would be true on your campus. Thinking of it more through a sustainable development lens so that you're, yes, meeting your climate mitigation or adaptation goals, but at the same time, you're also aiming to help with social equity or other goals simultaneously.
So if I may chime in to add to that, I think my response is actually twofold. I pasted into the chat a link to an event that I'm hosting at Yale next week that is about connecting teaching and research to the Sustainable Development Goals. And the reason we did that is not to say, oh, we're so great, we can tackle all the goals by ourselves. But the reason we did that is we now have a database that if you go into SDG 13, which is the climate action database, you see all of the researchers in the schools of public health or nursing or architecture or divinity whose work is on climate action. And that's part of why we're striving for that holistic approach. So part one for me is that is to sort of turn it so that you're not trying to artificially pull in the various people and get them to that point, but really looking at what's inspiring to people already and then calling on their passion for that. Another part of it is that climate is so huge. It's just over the top. It does connect to every single one of the Sustainable Development Goals, no question. And so in terms of developing a holistic approach, it's taking a bite-sized piece of what climate action is. And I'll take for it as just as a quick example, because I realize we're over time. I'm working on a biodiversity plan for Yale's campus. And to work on a biodiversity plan for Yale's campus, I need an ecologist, I need a mapper, I need a grounds maintenance person, but I also need to talk to the people who have to maintain our campus. So literally the people who are mowing the lawns, the people, and then also maybe to our Natural History Museum because they have educational programming. So really sort of taking it, saying, this is the project we're working on, who's interested? And turning it so that I'm not saying, hey, everybody's got to act for climate, but hey, we're going to do this one really robust thing. Who wants in? And making it really sort of positive and inclusive just in how it's staged.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. Véronique, is it time for conclusion?
Yes, I think we could discuss this subject longer, but we're very glad to see the enthusiasm. And I would invite you, Madame la Rectrice, to close these roundtables.
I'm listening to you. I see the energy. Look at the chat. Questions and great participation of so many students from everywhere in the world. And questions that are asked are so important. Role of campuses, role of students, strategies that we have to plan and use. The more we will share our best practices, the more we will be successful. And as I see with our discussions, our universities are not at the same level yet. And in the world, there are some that have committed students. They have sustainable development practices. Laval is carbon neutral on a voluntary basis. And we have different platforms for students to speak up and work on the sustainable development. And professors and research have included position of sustainable development. And they are asking systematically the question, in my project, do I have such a contribution? Different elements, even with all these actions in place, the leadership of our students is also very important. This allowed us, as you have said, students have brought the change and continue to bear the change here. Teachers also are so active. The opening, the capacity to discuss, this is also very important. It's not possible to have such a discussion. How can we find, first understand ourselves, find improvements, and a path for change and transformation? I wish and I see that your network will have this impact here in Laval, but not only for us, for many universities in the world, because you reach out now to a large network of committed students, to all of those who have thought, defined the network, articulated the vision, to all our partners supporting us, all those who have decided to contribute. I want to thank you so much, and long life to the network and the conferences like this one for this fight against climate change, and also for the development of a student capacity to help this transformation. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Mrs. Rector. So the event is ending. Thank you so much to all three panelists, to Cedrik, Dr. Goodall, Dr. Clarke. Thank you very much for joining us. Your experience will allow us to discuss. And Mrs. Rector, thank you for your great support for student action, and also for the network, UniC Network, which is very dynamic, as we saw. Thank you. Thank you to Hydro-Québec Institute in Environment and Development for coordinating the UniC Network, which is a very complex.
Et finalement, to all our students, you are the heart and soul of this network. So we look forward to start the network collaborative projects, and we will be very happy to share your contributions throughout the year.
In closing, please go to our website, unic.urava.ca. There's a second recruiting period of members of UniC. So this will be at the mid of November. This concludes the international network of UniC.
Thank you for your participation. Stay tuned for some news very soon and take care. Merci beaucoup et à bientôt.